Okay, so I want to welcome everyone. I am so glad to, I'm Ann Russo, and I'm the director of the Women's Center, and I teach in Women's and Gender Studies here at DePaul University. And I am very, I don't know, excited, thrilled, honored to have Adaku Utah to be with us this afternoon talking about cultivating resilience and channeling wisdom. It's just wonderful to have Adaku back here in Chicago. It's been many years, and I really miss her, and I know that many people in our community miss her. Before we get started with the program, I do want to turn it over to Dr. Julie Moody Freeman and Joelle Daly from the Center for Black Diaspora. And I want to just thank them right now for just all the work that they've put into this event. And also, I just love our collaborative relationship, and I have a lot of gratitude for that. So I just want to offer that as well. So I'll turn it over to Julie.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I always love working with Ann Russo at the Women's Center. Always a wonderful excuse to get together. I'd like to welcome Adaku. Such a pleasure meeting you. Before I have Joelle say a few words, I just wanted to thank the center staff, the Center for Black Diaspora staff, including my assistant director, Joelle Daly, Farad Berry, Jennifer Ogumiki, and Jessica Williams. Thank you so much. None of this could happen without your help. I'll turn you over to Joelle.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in today for the Center's event. We have been hosting a series of programming on Black public health in the year of COVID-19. And this is such a welcomed event today to talk about cultivating resilience and channeling wisdom. And we're so honored to have Adaku with us today, and I hope you enjoy our program.
Thank you. So I'll go ahead and introduce Adaku. Again, I want to just personally thank you, Adaku, for joining us today. As I said, I think being in community is really important for me, and being able to share this space is really powerful. And I feel like so many of us grew together in that time that we were working so closely together in Chicago, so much growth and creativity and transformation. So welcome. Adaku Utah is an incredible visionary, artist, healer, educator, community organizer. She's the co-founder and co-director of a beautiful project called Harriet's Apothecary, a healing village led by Black, cis women, queer and trans healers, artists, and organizers committed to living out Harriet Tubman's legacy of centering healing, wellness, and safety as movement building strategies. So you should definitely go and check out Harriet's Apothecary. It's just amazing. She's also the interim organizing director at the National Network of Abortion Funds. She teaches with BOLD, Black Organizing for Leadership and Dignity, and the Generative Somatics teaching team. And she proudly serves on the board of Soulfire Farm as a commitment to ending the racism and injustice in the food system. In her spare time, she loves nerding out about astrology, herbs, erotica, and sci-fi. So just a warm, loving welcome to Adaku.
Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Joelle. It is such an honor to get to be here with all of you in this space, co-creating this space together. I really believe that any space that I get to be invited into is a space that we get to shape with one another. And it's been 10 years since I've been in Chicago, and my time in DePaul, shout out to all the DePaul University folks out there right now. My time in DePaul really shaped me as a teacher, as an organizer, as a healer. And in Igbo tradition, so I'm Igbo, I grew up in a small town in Festac, Lagos, Nigeria. It is really important for us to start with gratitude, especially to our elders, our teachers, and so I offer you a deep bow of gratitude, Anne, for, and my teachers in here, Francesca, I see Barbara is in here too. A lot of folks who literally raised me and shapes me into someone who can offer something like this. You're part of the constellation of my life design. So I feel very, very grateful. I also want to offer gratitude, and I'm holding down the slide so you'll see my profile view a couple times. This is my dad, y'all. And my dad currently lives in Lagos, Nigeria. My mom lives here in New Jersey. And so much of my shaping also comes from my people, Igbo people, who are farmers, who are Marxist organizers, who are healers, who are herbalists, who are people who are rowdy and rebellious and care deeply about our folks. My last name, Utah, means one who holds in community. And I want to bring them into this space, one, to offer them reverence, but also to evoke whatever healing that happens in this space may touch them as well. I want to invite folks to also send whatever care and love that you can to our family members who exist and are living right now outside of the US context. There's so many of us who are holding, loving, caring for people who don't necessarily live here in the US under harsher conditions. So I love you, Dad. And I'm super grateful. My dad is currently holding down some mutual aid organizing right now in Lagos. Another thing about me that has shaped my work is I grew up as a chronically ill child in a really poor household, rich in a lot of ritual and possibility and rebel rousing and organizing and cash poor. And growing up as someone who was sick, I often had to navigate both the medical industrial complex and my mom, who's a 5th generation Dibia, what we call Dibia in Igbo land, herbalist healer, who made medicine and taught me how to make my own medicine from plants that we built relationship with from a really young age. And so I want to bring that into this space, bring that love, bring that care and protection into this space. It also feels really important to pause and offer reverence. This time that we're in is hard and complicated and has meant that so many of our people have died, have become ancestors far too soon. I want to first pause, given the week that we've had, or weeks, lifetimes really, that we've had to honor our folks. And I'm dedicating this presentation also to them, that the work that we learn about, the work that we do and how we heal in these times does right by these new ancestors. It also does right by the future generations who are coming. And so all of us have very complicated and different relationships to our ancestors, and we all honor our ancestors in many different ways. And so I just want to invite you right now, in the ways that you know how, even if it's just positioning your body in a way that offers some care and love to our folks who have transitioned into the next realm at the hands of state violence, at the hands of medical racism, at the hands of the prison industrial complex and the medical industrial complex, even if it's just with your breath. So let's just take a moment to honor our beloved community, our beloved family. Ashe. I want to also give reverence to all of the ways that you are holding down care right now. I feel like so much of the inspiration and grounding and hope that I feel right now has come from bearing witness to participating in how my community has been figuring out how to develop or strengthen models of care that our government has chosen to either forget about or chosen not to do. And so if you are in any of these roles, or if you're someone that's even just resting right now and taking care of your body, I want to offer you reverence. Shout out to all the parents, the teachers, the health workers in the house. Shout out to the land. I am living in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, also known as Lenape Territories. And the land has also been doing a lot of work, which we'll be talking about, to sustain our lives and our healing. And this presentation is here because I love visual learning. I'm a visual learner, and I know that there are visual folks here. And it's also here because there's going to be multiple points of interaction, including this moment. So if you can drop into the chat box, who else do you want to give gratitude to? And is there anybody who you want to honor right now in this moment? Who is supporting our collective? That's my dog Sage. Shout out to the pets and our fur friends. But yeah, who is someone in your life that you want to give gratitude to? Or who do you want to honor that is supporting the livelihood, the wellness, the resilience, our capacity to live and sustain ourselves right now? Who are those folks that you want to bring into this space, or just shout out? And you can go ahead and drop it into the chat box if you desire, or if you just want to write it in your own journal or notebook, or hold their name or the image of them in your heart. That's totally fine as well. We're going to talk a little bit more about resilience practices. And one of my favorites is pausing to extend gratitude to our people, not just for what they do, but for who they are. Because without any one of us, we would have such huge loss in this planet. So thank you. I sadly can't see the chat box, but I'm imagining that people are writing in there. Joelle, can you read out a couple if folks are putting some things in there just to shout them out?
Let me unmute myself. I have somebody saying something in language. My Obashan and Safta, Yuri Kochiyama, and Miss Angela Davis. I think are people, yeah, I think that's the only person who have said anything thus far.
Awesome.
This is from, oh, it's private. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm trying to, people are just giving names of individuals and they're sending it to me privately, where they're giving out names of individuals.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks for folks who are sharing, whether you're writing it down or you are thinking about the person that you want to offer gratitude to, or the constellation of land that you want to honor. Thank you for pausing and offering reverence. So the shape of this journey we're about to be on is centering nature, neurons, and neighbors. I love these N-words, and part of how we've been able to exist into this moment is because of what nature, the neurons in our bodies and across different atoms in our solar system, and our neighbors, both our neighbors who are present and neighbors who are ancestors, have taught us, have worked with us, have organized alongside with us. And so we're going to focus our attention there. There's so many things to focus on when we talk about resilience, and just want to let y'all know that we will be focusing our hearts and energy and conversation in these three spheres, and as much as we're able to in the time that we have. And even in this moment, just think for yourself, with these N-words, nature, neurons, and neighbors, what pieces of nature, what parts of your own neurons in your body, who are neighbors that have taught you something about healing, or who have been a call to action around how to survive across your life. And part of why I'm focusing in these places is because oftentimes, especially in this moment where the wellness industrial complex is casting a lot of things at us right now around how to take care of ourselves, like it almost seems like some of this stuff is new, and we come from such powerful ancient practices and ancient relationships that have supported us, our legacies in being here. And so that is another reason why we're going to focus our attention here. And for our time together, I want to invite folks to level up on your curiosity and your care with one another. Many of us, if not all of us, have been in Zoom calls from like 7 in the morning to late at night. And I think this virtual world has the capacity to remove or shorten the connections that we have with one another and impact our attention with one another. And I just want to keep calling you in, calling your humanity in, calling your presence in as you are able to. I know some of us are juggling multiple things right now. I love multitasking. And in moments like this where we get to share community with one another, feels precious to me, even though it's happening through Zoom. And here's some places, or some ways rather, that we can be with one another, not as a practice of perfection, but as a way to practice, like even in this moment, we can practice the kind of world we want to live in with one another, the kind of attention that our bodies deserve right now, because we know that the medical industrial complex is not giving our people, particularly Black, Indigenous, and people of colors, enough attention. Part of how this disease has thrived is because the government did not give enough attention to the warning signs, to our people, to what was happening all around the world. And so even in this moment, we can practice amplifying our attention and our care with one another, that hopefully builds up the practice and the capacity that we need right now and into the future to move away from harm and move closer to liberation. So I want to invite folks to use I statements as you're sharing in the chat box. There's going to be multiple opportunities to share your stories. No one knows everything. Lord knows I don't know everything, but together we know a lot, and I'm hoping this space can be a place of harvest where we get to share resources with one another and questions, strategic questions that we have, and hopes and dreams that we can use as inspiration or as fuel or as fortification as we move through our days. Again, I think in a moment of like where the narrative of scarcity, of judgment, of pain, of death is so high, it's really easy for us to internalize that and share it on one another. And so just keep noticing how you're showing up and moving towards curiosity, compassion, and care. And then practice self-determination. This is one of the first things that oppression robs from us. Everything that I invite you to do is an invitation, and you get to choose how much of it you want to say yes to, say no to. Let me think about that. And that is totally fine. Your body is a teacher, your body is wise, and your body is also a healer as well. And so if there's anything that I invite you to do where you're like, that does not work for me, that does not align, trust that knowing. And if you need to be on video or off video, if you need to lay down, I highly encourage it. Please lay down. If you want to stand up, if you want to be moving around while we are in this place together, please do that in a way that really offers your body kindness. And take care of yourselves in the ways that you know how to in this moment, even if it's just sipping some water. If you don't have water and need some, I got my gallon jug over here. And yeah, water is life. Water is such an essential part of nature. We're gonna spend some time talking a little bit about the gifts of water. And it is actually part of how we survive is to not have ashy insides. So drink water and hydrate, and do any other things that you need to support yourself. And then if there's anything that I share that you're like, what is that? What are you talking about, Adaku? And you're not sure, feel free to ask questions. Feel free to do a jargon giraffe, which is just another way of bringing attention to something that I have shared or someone has shared that needs more explanation or doesn't make sense to you. Cool. I'm just gonna pause there to let all of that land. Again, this is a practice of not of perfection, but just a practice of cultivating the world and moment that will support us in moving closer to liberation and away from harm. Cool. I love outcomes. I'm like, where are we going? I was raised by a Virgo father and a Capricorn mom. So every time I go into a space, I'm like, what are we about to do? So for my folks who can relate with that, this is 3 places where I hope that we can land together today. I'm hoping that we can deepen our relationships with ourselves, with one another, maybe one other person on this call, and with the land that we're surrounded by, with nature, and one ancestor, whether it's an ancestor that is part of your bloodline or an ancestor who you've learned about or want to learn more about, who inspires you. I am hoping that we can also learn more about how do our bodies emotionally, physically, and spiritually and psychically show up in the midst of change and in the midst of trauma, because there's so much wisdom that lives inside of our cells, our muscles, our bones, our emotions, our feelings. Every single part of us holds wisdom, and it's part of the design of capitalism to keep us focused on our brains and keep us moving as products so that we are not connected to this ocean of wisdom and ocean of power that resonates not just in our brains, but also in our hands and our hearts and our lungs and our kidneys, and in feelings of rage and feelings of depression and feelings of joy and confusion. Like all of these places, I want to normalize and also reclaim that they have so much to teach us right now, some of which we'll learn about and some of which we're going to be like, I don't know, I need another moment to think about what's happening with myself right now. And then we'll also get to share resilience practices with one another. I'll share a couple with me. We'll do some practices together. And you will also have an opportunity to share as well, as much as you feel comfortable doing. So that's where we're headed together. Aurora Leva Morales is one of my just elders, favorite folks to learn from. I just was Marco Poloing with them recently and keep coming back to their work. They are a writer, have done a lot of work around healing justice and disability justice. If you haven't heard of them, please, please, please look them up. This is one of my favorite books that they have written. And on their website, they have a lot of powerful articles that that really ground us in how we can move in these times. And so much of their work feels really timeless. And I wanted to share this quote that Aurora offers to us. And Aurora says, what our bodies require in order to thrive is what the world requires. What our bodies require in order to thrive is what the world requires. If there is a map to get there, it can be found in the atlas of our skin and bone and blood, in the tracks of neurotransmitters and antibodies. We need nourishment, equilibrium, water, connection, justice. We need nourishment, equilibrium, water, connection, justice. So we all have these maps that are our bodies, and I'm hoping maybe you are someone who likes to draw, and you want to bring out a sheet right now to draw some lessons that you learn about what your body needs right now to thrive. And as Aurora says, and as I truly believe, what you are discovering is also something that the world needs as well, and is not just your medicine, but is also the medicine for us. So follow the maps that reveal themselves to you in this conversation. A quick note on grief, although it feels like weird to say quick note on grief, because grief is a lot. And I just wanna, there's so many folks who have transitioned, and there's so much loss that we're experiencing right now, whether it's loss of relationships, loss of jobs, loss of connection. And these are all the stages of grief that we know of right now. There might be more. Your body might be telling us that there are other stages. And as I read through these stages, just notice which ones are present with you right now. And the stages of grief, we can move through these different stages in one meeting, in one Zoom meeting. We can move through them many cycles through our whole lives. And I've been bringing in this slide into a lot of the spaces that I enter, because how we grieve shapes how we are in relationship. And also whatever stage that we're in shapes how we're in relationship, shapes how we listen, shapes where we're open, shapes what kind of boundaries we put up, shapes where we long for connection. And so as I read out each one, notice for yourself, which one am I majoring in right now? Which one is like, I am here in my body. And again, from a place of just compassion of like, this is just what's showing up right now. And it will change because that is how grief moves. That is how emotions move. They move like the ocean, like the waves in the ocean, is that they change. So denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, meaning. So shout out for taking a moment to just notice for yourself. And shout out if noticing right now it feels like too much. If you're like, I'm not there yet to notice how I'm feeling around these things, and that's okay too. But if these show up at any different moment in our time together today, just honor what's showing up and ask them, what do they want to teach you right now? What's your anger teaching you about right now? Or maybe what is your depression longing for? What is your acceptance? How is it supporting your own resilience right now? Okay. So resilience, I've mentioned that word a couple of times, and I just want to ground in how I hold it. Folks define resilience in a number of different ways, but this is how I and my teachers have taught me about what resilience is. Resilience is inherent. So it's not something that you get for $39.99 on a healing website or, or something that you buy outside of yourself. It is something that we actually are all born with. And in fact, to go to the third one, we are proof that resilience is possible, because in your body right now, there are over 3.7 trillion cells that are all organized right now for your survival. Your cardiovascular system is organizing with your nervous system. Your nervous system is organizing with your endocrine system. Photosynthesis that happens outside in nature, where red dirt and soil and water come together to figure out how to live. There's so many systems of resilience that live within us and also around us that support us in being here. Even in the way that you're sitting right now and the way that your bones are holding you up, is how your body is like, ooh, how can I support your life right now? How can I support you in living? And it's also how our communities, the earth, our cells, our bodies reclaim, restore, and resist oppressive, difficult, and this should say traumatic. I use oppressive. Trauma could also be oppressive as well. So we know that even in our dreams, from the moment that we wake up, we are, especially in these times, we are facing so much change and so much harm from, what's happening on the level of the state. In my community, there's been an increase in surveillance and police presence because this is a predominantly Black community. A lot of the mandates around social distancing have increased, specifically with folks of color, to, experiencing microaggressions at the workplace, to having that cute person that you wanted to call you, not call you. There's all of these different things that impact our bodies, and resilience is how our bodies make sense of these experiences and also work to transform them so that we can continue to live. And live in a way that actually allows for us to, again, I keep coming back to this statement of doing less harm and offering our bodies as much liberation, more joy, more connection as possible. So back to the nature, remember nature neurons, neighbors, we're gonna kind of go down that path now and talk about, I wanna share some examples of resilience that we can remember or get connected to and keep in our hearts as we move through challenging experiences throughout the day, throughout our weeks, throughout our months that impacts our resilience. There's actually so many wise teachers like the earth that supports how we live. So y'all, the earth is 4.543 billion years old, which is, like, my brain tries to quantify that often and it has a hard time doing that. And it's such a long period of time. And part of why it feels important to name that is because, can you imagine, like, since February, life has looked completely different. Only within a span of 3 months, life has changed completely different. And imagine what the earth has seen, not just in 1 year, not just in 5 years, but in 4.543 billion years old, years of living. And still the earth is here. And one of the reasons why I keep coming back to the earth as one of the main teachers that I get really excited about is that the earth has billions of years of practice in how to survive so many different kinds of disaster, from disaster through fires, through over flooding, to the prison industrial complex. Most, if not all, actually all of those are man-made, and human beings are actually the youngest species on the earth, and we've caused the most damage. And ancestral systems across many different cultures, in particular Black, Indigenous, and people of color, communities have learned how to thrive and also learned how to live because they have listened to, because they have learned from the earth. And, when you see this picture, this like zoomed out picture of the Earth from space, you see this like blue, lots of blue orientation. That is water. And that water is represented in us. Like we are a fractal of the water that lives in the Earth. And the Earth is covered in 70% water. And we cannot literally live without, one, tending to the water, and also being connected to water in some way. And water is one of having a relationship with water, whether that's like drinking water or bathing in water or sitting by a body of water, or even just being with my breath, which is also part water and air, is part of how we get to sustain ourselves. I also want to shout out the magnetosphere. So this magnetosphere is at the center of the Earth, like core of the Earth's core molten center. And there are two poles on either side, top and bottom of the Earth. It helps to create a force field of magnetic protection around the Earth. And if that protection wasn't there, there would be all kinds of matter from the solar system, and mostly from the sun, that would be coming in and penetrating the Earth's atmosphere. And so even the Earth practices boundaries, and also is consistently cultivating life forms that support our own livelihoods. And most things that live on the Earth have recycled in some way in order to not necessarily waste energy, but to keep recycling almost as a spiral of life, honoring the life and death cycle, and also producing or extending life even past what we call quote unquote death. And some people wouldn't even call it death, it's just like a different stage of life. And all of these qualities live in us in some way, and capitalism has taken us away from a lot of these different ways of being that the Earth has taught us, whether it's like the ways in which capitalism centers youth and doesn't honor the legacy of time, or capitalism wants us to buy all of these new products instead of having us be with what we have used, sharing what we have used, recycling what we have used. Nature also operates in systems. So many of us are familiar with the systems of racism, ableism, capitalism that impacts how our communities are able to live the lives that support their families, themselves. And we are also inside of systems of nature that that are actually teaching us different ways of how to care right now. So I want to honor the circulation of water in our ocean, the weather and climate systems, energy cycles, and ancestral systems, which we're about to get into right now. And these are also part of why I'm presencing this right now too, is it's really part of the design of capitalism actually is for us to hyper focus on what capitalism does to us. And it's important to focus on it and pay attention to what the ways that it has been harmful, disruptive, colonized our people, so that we can transform it. And I also think it's just as important to recognize that those are not the only systems that we operate in. Those are not the only systems that we get to rely on. And those are not the only systems that are going to take care of us. Actually, there are other systems that exist that support our lives. So before we start talking about our ancestors, I wanted to share this quote from Bill Bryson. I've been nerding out on this book, y'all. Another book to nerd out on called The Body, A Guide for Occupants. And Bill says, every time you breathe, you exhale some 25 sextillion. That's 2.5 times 1,022 molecules of oxygen. So many that with a day's breathing, you will in all likelihood inhale at least one molecule from the breaths of every person who has ever lived. Ever lived. And every person who lives from now until the sun burns out will from time to time breathe in a bit of you. At the atomic level, we are in a sense eternal. So everyone just take a breath right now. Yes. So that breath you took in might have been Octavia Butler's breath, a molecule of her. Maybe it was the breath of your great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. And maybe it was the breath of the first teacher you ever had who supported you in changing. And in our breathing, we will keep our stories alive too. So just wanted to offer that as you breathe, and in particular when our lungs have so much focus right now, that you maybe conjure up or think about someone in the past or present who you want to honor, or just presence. So, ancestors, there's so many. I was like, oh my God, I want to talk about so many people. And I'm only going to highlight a few, obviously, because of the time. And as I'm sharing about these folks, I just want you to think about folks who these ancestors remind you of, what they are inspiring in you, maybe what's some kind of medicine or strength that you want to borrow from them right now in these intense times. So I want to start with the Bori people who have been using a practice like throughout time since the 18th century to support folks who are moving through mental illness in not only being with what's moving through their body, affirming it, but also offering some form of therapy, some form of care, and using that through movement and dance. And how many of us have heard a song or been dancing with ourselves in a room or been at a club and you moved your body in some particular way and something shifted for you, something, whether it was you offered a little bit more care to yourself or you felt more like yourself. And the Bori people are folks, many folks across the diaspora, part of many folks across the diaspora who have used movement as a way to not only be in ceremony, but also to just be with trauma in our lives. I want to shout out in 1780 and 1830 in the antebellum, I hope I'm saying it right, South, the population of African American folks dropped from 20% to less than 10%, which is frightening. And historically, in so many places around the world, because of genocide, because of slavery, because of capitalism, because of colonization, the population of Black folks has decreased. And in some places it has increased. And part of how folks were able to survive during those times was actually leaning in on spiritual practices, whether it was from the Congo, herbalism from the Congo arts, or the relationship to land, like from folks in Nigeria and Igbo people, my people, or using and cultivating protective amulets from nature that the Bambara people offered to one another to make sure that Black people were still here. I want to shout out the Free African Society. So mutual aid is such a word right now. And if you're doing mutual aid, I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for the work that you're doing. And also to ground in the history of mutual aid, one of the first mutual aid groups that was established in Philadelphia was the Free African Society in 1787. There was not just part of, offering services or giving Black people things that they needed to survive. It was part of actually a larger abolitionist organizing strategy to give Black people power in Philadelphia as more quote unquote free Black people were coming up to the north looking for jobs, looking for homes, looking to rebuild their communities. And around that time was the yellow fever epidemic, which is a fascinating read if you are curious about how, one of my practices of resilience is studying how Black people thrived and overcame inside of pandemics, and reading about the yellow fever epidemic is powerful. So if you're interested, you like to nerd about that kind of thing, I highly recommend it. And specifically read about how the Free African Society created models of care. They created their own medical systems. They created their own schools. They created their own food systems and sources of farming that was barred actually by the government when the yellow fever epidemic hit. And so many of the interventions that were used to support folks in healing through the yellow fever epidemic came from the Free African Society in Philadelphia. These are my folks, Igbo people, 1929, the Aba riots, folks who, I would say women and femme folks, who created one of the largest forms of opposition to the British Empire. And they literally created these huge riots that, with thousands of people, like up to 20,000 people, that would go to prisons and take people out of prisons, out of jail. They created their own health systems as well. They created barriers of the British Empire putting in a tax in their food sources. And they did this through a lot of just community and relationship building with their folks. And this is one of the most inspiring stories to me, just given what people can do with what they have. And, you know, these are folks who, in Nigeria, we call them market women, who are mostly elders who sell things at the markets and take care of kids. And they led one of the most powerful riots and oppositions to the British Empire, not just in Nigeria, but on the continent. Shout out to the Black Panther Party. There's so much we can say here about the Black Panther Party, but what I want to highlight is they, like the Free African Society, cultivated these serve the people programs that the government also too modeled after to create a lot of the free breakfast programs, the Head Start programs that we see now. And there were over 60 of them. Sometimes we only hear about 3 of them, but there was over 60 of them that were created in times where the government turned their backs on Black people, and Black Panther folks were like, we are gonna create our own school system. We're gonna create our feeding system. We are going to protect ourselves. We are going to have legal representation for our people. And so all of these places of care that the government has a responsibility to provide for our people, the Black Panther Party was like, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do this for us. Also shout out to the Young Lords as well, who in a time where TB wasn't understood, tuberculosis, they figured out a way to get folks tested all over here in the Bronx and El Barrio. And in 1972, ended up taking over one of the hospitals in New York, Lincoln Hospital, to make sure that our folks were getting care in that hospital. And there's so many examples of this, but I wanted to highlight the Porcupine Health Clinic in South Dakota, which was developed by Lakota leaders, and it still exists today, seeing, actually this number has grown given the pandemic, but it is an independent Indian controlled health clinic for folks who are not just in South Dakota, but folks who are around the surrounding states and on reservations to make sure that folks are able to access care that are self-determined by our people. So in the chat, let's just shout out a couple, like who are folks that you want to honor, who has taught you about resilience, who are ancestors who've taught you about resilience. I'm looking at the time, we're going to move to question and answer soon, but I just wanted to offer folks an opportunity to share as well. And anybody that you mentioned, learn more about them, learn more about their own strategies for how they existed. Every person that I mentioned, if it's the first time that you've heard about them, read more about them to learn their survival tactics, both around not just like the direct service, but also the organizing strategies that they use to build power in times of pandemic, in times of depression, Great Depressions, in times of slavery. Over the course of time, our ancestors have figured out how to survive, and there's many examples of that, including from our own families. So our bodies respond to change and trauma in a number of different ways, and a number of us have seen like the flight, freeze, appease model, which is useful for some people. And I think in general, noticing the ways that your body habitually responds to change is an important place to look towards. So most of the time, what are your primary thoughts that show up? What feelings show up? What moods or actions do you take? And then what historical experiences and reoccurrent conditioning keeps impacting your response to change and trauma? And then what are you noticing right now about your main ways of relating to your personal self, the people around you, and the environment? And again, noticing all of these things from a place of care, because our bodies want to keep us safe, they want us to belong, and they also want to restore our dignity. So all the ways that all of our habitual responses are deeply connected to how can our bodies keep us alive, and also how can our bodies preserve our quote unquote normal, like what is we're used to. And what we also know is that those strategies are not the only strategies that we have and can learn. And that's one of the great things about resilience is it doesn't necessarily mean that we won't experience difficult things in our lives. It just means that we can learn how to be with difficult situations with more tools, more resources, and more of ourselves, building more connection. So yeah, pay attention to these. If you're someone who journals or just writes, or if you have somebody that you trust that can pay attention to you, to share with you what things show up the most in your actions, in your thoughts, in how you relate. And how are those things, this is a question for you to reflect on. What patterns show up for you? And in what ways is your body trying to honor your safety, belonging, and dignity? In what ways are your body trying to honor your safety, belonging, and dignity? Okay. So there are many ways to practice resilience, and I've talked about a couple of them, and here are some that I want to highlight that I've been really leaning in on. The mindfulness industry has also blown up a lot. Some of us meditate. I definitely meditate. And practicing mindfulness doesn't necessarily have to take on the shape of meditation. I believe mindfulness is bringing in more attention and noticing to your relationship to the ecosystem of life around you. So what's your relationship to how you cook? What's your relationship to how you talk to another person? What's your relationship to how you move through your community? And does what you're practicing, what you're doing, does it produce harm or liberation? And where might you need to shift so you can keep orienting yourself towards more liberation? And then lots of people are like, connect with connect in the ways that you can. And I'm like, back up from that, because not everybody needs to be connecting with. But really thinking about how do you know when your body trusts someone else? And asking people, even your friends, in this moment of like, can we have a consensual relationship that's built off of trust? And what does that look like for us in this moment? Because of so much hyper disorientation, our hypervigilance has increased, and also our ability to trust has also decreased. And so what does trust look like for you in this particular moment? And who does your body trust right now? And that might just be one person, and that might be two people. And the next one, practice boundaries. It might also look like, and this happened for me actually a couple of weeks ago, where I was like, oh, I actually can't be friends with this person anymore. I love this person a lot, but our relationship is breaking some level of trust, or is creating a sense of, or a lack of safety for me. So shifting that. I love this one so much, learning from your past. And we've all triumphed over something that we, at that point, were like, there's no way I can get through this. Like, there's no way I'm going to get through this moment. And we, by virtue that we're here, we've overcome those moments. And so what supported you in doing that? What were the conditions within yourself and around you that shaped you overcoming a moment where you didn't think you could? And some of those things might still be relevant for this moment, and some of them might not. But I imagine that there's something in there that will elicit something that you need to have for this moment to support your survival. And resilience takes time to build. It takes time to build. And so because of the ways that capitalism centers perfection and like, we got to get it right now, we don't often give ourselves the spaciousness for us to build the muscle of resilience. So we might start something new and we're like, I can't do it. I can't do this new habit. It's too much. And sometimes it might be too much, because some of us are overachievers and try to do 10 new things, like myself. Like, I'm going to wake up and meditate and drink water and run, like, my therapist, thank God for therapists, are like, let's start with one of those things, and maybe start with 5 minutes of those things to just be kind to ourselves and considerate and realistic of what feels possible right now. And then how can we take action to turning the world's axis towards transformation and liberation? So many of you are doing this right now with your organizing, with your writing, with your resting, and are there mutual aid networks that you can be connected to? If you have access to money, who can you donate to right now? What are ways that we can move away from this individualism that capitalism teaches us, and inviting more community care? So I'm gonna pause there and just like open it up for just questions or thoughts. I know we're pushing up against time. And yeah, I just offered a lot in there, and I wanted to let things land and also let folks offer any reflections or questions that are coming up for you.
And just a reminder that the chat goes to Joel Daly.
Do you have advice for feeling fear?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for that question. And I'm curious about what your fear is teaching you in this particular moment. Fear, like all the emotions that we have, you get to choose how much of that you want to feel in any given moment. So you don't necessarily need to feel the fear of like all the things that you are afraid of in your entire life, or thinking about what has happened this week with Black folks, like feeling into the ways in which Black bodies have been cruelly impacted by the state. There are ways that we can feel as much as our body wants to reveal to us, or maybe we just want to feel the sensations, like the sensations that come up in our chest. The other thing that I will say with fear is that fear shifts over time, it shifts over seasons. And so the ways in which fear lives in our bodies in this moment is going to look different tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And because fear can feel so big, we can, there's a way in which we can hold the memory of the gigantic feeling of fear as like, that's the only way that fear can move through me. And fear moves in many different ways. And so if writing feels useful for you, of like, I feel afraid of blank, or if moving your body, dancing to a song feels really good for you. One of the songs that I like to move to when I feel afraid is Doomed by Moses Sumney. And I just dance to that song. I often also make up songs when I'm afraid. I wish we had more time so I can sing one with you. And fear also, there's a lot of shame connected to fear and feeling fear and expressing fear. And I've also found sharing a fear that I have with someone that I trust, even my dog, helps to diminish some of the, it diminishes the impossibility of it, and it makes it feel a little bit more accessible, like, oh, I can actually be with this thing and not lie about it or try to minimize it or sugarcoat it, but just be like, this is what it is, in the ways that I'm able to in that moment.
Right. There is an MJ Larrabee who posed a question that
Yes.
says, I'm wondering if you can share with us any specific movement practices for engaging our bodies and moving toward healing, maybe that have roots in your African culture.
Yes, actually, I want to practice something with you all right now. And we're going to use, I've been sharing this practice a lot with folks. We're going to use the medicine of the drum. So the drum, across many African diasporic cultures, has been an instrument, also a rhythm, the rhythm of the drums, rhythms of the drum, have been shown, there's been research about this, and there's also been like felt experience of shifting our connection to our body. So bringing in more connection, building up the immune system, softening stress. And so we're gonna do that right now. And I invite you to either stand up, lay down, or just get a little bit more comfortable in your seat. And whatever position you choose, let it offer you more care right now. Let it feel a little bit more kind, a little bit more gracious. If you want to move away from the computer, you can. You might feel a part of you closing up, tightening, or maybe a part of you that feels a little bit more open. And notice how these are all ways that the 3.7 trillion cells are supporting your life right now. So just notice. Good. Go ahead and bring your palm to your heart. And feel your heartbeat. And be gentle here. So you're not pressing into your heart. You're just softly kissing your palm to your heart. And feel that heartbeat. And from this place, offer gratitude for this organ, for supporting you in breathing, because your heart is connected to your blood and your cells, your lungs. Good. And from this place, we're just gonna tap. You can just notice me here. We're just gonna create a drum beat with one beat. And again, be gentle here. Be soft, be kind. And hopefully this beat brings you in more connection with either your heart or maybe another place in your body. Good. From this place, in your next inhale, think about one person who you love, whose life is important to you, someone you care about. And let your next breath be an ode to gratitude to their life. Good. And in your next breath, think about someone who loves you. Someone who, because of the way that they live and what they have done or who they are, your life is possible. So it might be an ancestor we learned about today. It might be an ancestor in your legacy. It might be water. Or maybe it's a future child that's coming. Good. And then bring your hand to one more place in your body that's holding tension right now. That's like really, really tight. And bring your palm there and that soft beat. And just let that part of you know that I hear you. This part of you is not disposable. This part of you has wisdom to offer. This part of you is holding something with you. And let's pause there. And let's take a collective breath in and exhaling out. So there are many ways to learn about resilience, and the avenues that you brought up are possible ways. Some people learn about it through podcasts, some people learn about it through reading, some people learn about it through having a teacher. That's been my mode of learning about mindfulness, is finding a teacher who's been practiced in it for a number of years and is not culturally appropriating mindfulness practices. And then practicing on my own. I think the most important thing that's connected to that question is, what's the way that you learn best? What's the way that allows for you to take in something, particularly if it's new? We all have different styles of learning. Some of us are visual learners. Some of us need to be in the practice of the thing. Some of us need teachers. And some of us don't need any of that. We can just absorb and just practice some things on our own. So my question back to you is what's the best way that you learn? And what's the best way that supports you in building a new habit over time? For some people, that's having an accountability buddy. I will offer, actually, I send out an email with a couple of resources that I have of meditations, places that I have learned from my teachers, places that also Harriet's Apothecary is holding meditation circles or mindfulness circles, and I'll share that with you. And the second question, oh my God, how do we teach children to trust? Oh my God, that's such a brilliant question that I think should be taken everywhere. One of the first places that I come to with that question is bodily autonomy. So we are so robbed, even as a young age, to not trust our bodies, to not trust our intuitive sense about whether or not to let people hold us or whether or not to trust certain people, talking to people. And I am so curious to learn. I'm curious always to learn from kids. And for the person who asked this question, is in this particular moment, like what is your child naturally gravitating towards? Like what is their body choosing to trust right now? And how can you create the conditions that supports your child in trusting their knowing, trusting what they feel connected to, and why, and learning why. Like why do you trust this thing? And I would say opening up questions with your child about, what does trust mean to you? How do you know you trust something? Like, what is it about your body that lets you know that you trust me as your parent or me as your caregiver? And you can also be vulnerable and share that with what you're discovering too with your child. And if you're somebody who has like an ecosystem of support with your child, like fellow people who you're raising your child with, having those conversations are really critical of like, how do we keep building trust with one another? Because we know we're gonna fuck up. We know we're gonna hurt each other. We know we're gonna cause harm. When we make mistakes, how do we rebuild trust? And what does this child need to feel like, okay, this thing happened, I trust you, I can trust you again, or these things need to happen for me to rebuild trust. And it could be something as like simple as like, let's watch this show together and figure out which characters we trust and why, to like talking about ourselves personally, and calling to attention what shows up in our relationships.
Okay, I feel like that's the only question I have here. Dr. Moody Freeman, did you have any questions?
I guess I think maybe my question would be, in these times, what would you say or do for wellness in terms of anxiety?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you? Yeah. You could maybe start with yourself. Yeah. Practices, because I mean, like you're in the center of.
I'm in the center of a lot of things. Yes.
In Chicago, we are also, my zip code is sort of the hotbed. We're close to hospitals, and we're in the hotbed of,
yeah.
And so I find myself very anxious.
Yeah.
So I'm always curious as to what practices.
Yes, I love this question. I'm someone who's experienced anxiety my whole life. I'm like, ugh. And not in like a bad way, but in like I have such a deep and long history with anxiety, and it's taught me so much. Right now, the way that my anxiety has shown up in, I'm somebody who loves structure. Like it's part of how my ADHD shows up. It's part of, as someone who grew up in Nigeria where there was a lot of violence in my household, and I'm the eldest child, and just witnessed a lot of violence, like creating structures of safety support me in feeling less anxious. Like when I don't feel like I have access to those things, or I can't control my environment in some way, it creates so much anxiety inside of me. And the way that shows up in my body, I like shake, talk really fast. My heart is racing. We know that there are people, including myself, who are immunocompromised. And so my family and I, we've been meeting every Sunday at 11 o'clock for the last 10 weeks now. And we've been spending those times imagining the worst case scenarios and planning around it. Like, okay, what happens if one of us gets sick and no one can get a hold of us? Like my dad, he lives in Nigeria. We can't fly there. The phones are off sometimes. And part of why we do that is it normalizes the fear and the anxiety, and just like having multiple people hold it together has been really useful. And then building up a plan, which I think is really important, especially for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, because oftentimes when we go to the hospital, the medical industrial complex or doctors often who are privileging white bodies are not paying attention to what our bodies need, or what our boundaries are, or these are the medications that we need, or this is the kind of therapy that we need. And so having a clear plan of that has been really supportive. I've also been asking myself, why am I anxious? Like, what are the conditions that are happening right now? So I love that you brought up a meeting, because I'm in constant meetings all the time. And sometimes it's because I don't trust somebody who's leading something, or I don't feel prepared, or sometimes it's because I've been holding too much and I need to ask for support. Like, actually, sometimes our anxiety, and mine definitely shows up even more when I feel exhausted. When I feel exhausted, hungry, not well hydrated. And what's that thing, halt? I can't remember who created it, but it's like what you ask yourself if you are feeling, one of the things.
Angry, lonely, or tired.
Tired, exactly. And talking with my therapist, talking with my friends about resentment that I'm holding. Sometimes I hit a pillow and scream inside of a pillow to let that anger and rage and disappointment come out, so it's not stuck. All of our feelings need to move in our bodies. It's why, like, animals shake when they're scared. So being with those emotions in a kind way. And water, like bathing in water, drinking water also helps to move anxiety. Being in the rain, now that it's getting summer or hotter, if you haven't done like a summer rain, just going out there and let the water just fall on you, I highly recommend it. That also might produce some anxiety for some people, so don't do it if it doesn't work for you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks to everybody for staying. I don't, but we have to.
Right. I know we went over, and I'm so grateful for it. I just want to say that I deeply appreciate each of you. I know some of you, and I don't know some of you, and you are such a sacred, necessary piece of this world. And I'm grieving with you. I'm angry at the state of the world with you, and I'm hopeful with you of how we can transform with the wisdom that we have in our bodies and around us with our ancestors and plants, to take what's happening right now and make it into the alchemy that we need in this moment. And I hope that whatever you choose and whoever you choose to be around you in this moment is offering you exactly what you need, or at least 5% more of what you need to live right now. And it's been an honor to be here with you today.